Hey YouTubers, it's Charlie. So huge news, George R. R. Martin was at a convention this past weekend and read from new material from Winds of Winter, so he revealed some big details about Brienne's backstory that made her that much more badass. So just careful for spoilers if you don't want to know anything about Brienne. Brienne is one of those characters that's been really put upon as she tells her history. There was that episode where she was talking to Pod, explaining how they called her Brienne the Beauty as an insult, because even though you look at her right now and she's really big, really strong, total badass, you have to remember that she's probably been that tall since she was about 15 or 16, maybe even younger than that, and it takes boys just a little bit longer to catch up at that age. So if you think that she's taller than, say, like Sir Jaime now, then imagine how big the difference was when they were teenagers. So as she tells it, as a child, her father tried to marry her off 3 times, just like you would with a traditional lady from a noble house, but it led to 3 broken engagements just because no one would have her. And you can imagine how bad things got when she would just embarrass people that would get into fights with her. Like she'd spar with some of the other nobles and just kick their asses. So you can imagine like all those young noble boys' wounded pride just saying awful, awful things about her entire life. So as much as that sucks, she's become this amazing badass on the TV show. She's still a badass in the books. The show has just pushed her to the forefront a little bit more. She's a little bit more of a background character in the books. But here's the really cool thing that George R. R. Martin did this past weekend. If you've read the Dunk and Egg series, Sir Duncan the Tall is named the protector of young Egg, Aegon V, who becomes the future king of Westeros. So that series is all about their adventures together, like this really giant hedge knight and the future king of Westeros just palling around over the 7 kingdoms. But of the new material that George R. R. Martin read, he named Brienne the descendant of Sir Duncan the Tall. So it's just a really easy fix to make a character that everyone already loves, that has a pretty terrible backstory, have a really amazing backstory. Like, oh, you think she had it bad, but she comes from this amazing lineage. So just think of all the amazing things that she's going to do. Hopefully she makes it to season 8. She's one of those characters that definitely throws herself in the line of fire. So given that we have several characters now that all have Valyrian swords, including the newest, Samwell, it would be such a disappointment if she didn't get to use Oathkeeper at some point to just hulk out on some White Walkers. But let me know in the comments, what do you think about Brienne being the descendant of Sir Duncan the Tall? And if you haven't read the books, he's kind of like the most famous knight in the history of Westeros, at least at this point. The show has actually invoked a little of Dunk and Egg. You may have missed it briefly, but Maester Aemon talks about Egg as he's dying. Egg, mother's calling you. Egg from the Dunk and Egg series was one of Maester Aemon's brothers. You have to remember, Maester Aemon is very, very old. But it was a really touching, sweet moment, especially what happened to his family later in life. At the end of his life, that King Aegon died in what was called the tragedy at Summerhall. Side note, it's actually one of the instances that people point to when they say that Targaryens, not all Targaryens, are immune to fire because they died in a giant house fire, like almost his entire family was wiped out. But the really cool thing about Dunk and Egg is that George R. R. Martin has actually pointed to it as his leading choice for a spin-off should HBO decide to do a Game of Thrones spin-off. And I think they definitely want to, but Dan and Dave are so set on finishing what they're doing right now, getting through the next season, that they haven't announced anything about a spin-off yet, whether it's going to have different producers, but George R. R. Martin is like full steam ahead. He's like 2 thumbs up, definitely go for it, do a spin-off. So if we get a spin-off, it will probably be The Adventures of Dunk and Egg. George R. R. Martin said that he's going to continue to write Dunk and Egg. He'll continue to write expanded material, so there'll be plenty more new awesome people that he introduces. But as of right now, it's just that Sir Duncan the Tall is the perfect ideal of the person that Brienne is trying to become. All I ever wanted to do was become a knight, she says. That's why I've been a little disappointed with Jaime this season so far. Yeah, he's been on a tear. We got to see that amazing Mad King, Kingslayer flashback. But I think it's especially disappointing for book readers because in the books, he's on slightly more of a redemptive arc. And the show thus far, at least this far in the season up to episode 6, makes it seem like he's learned, like none of Brienne's good qualities have rubbed off on him. That's why I'm just waiting for someone to write fanfiction where Tormund and Jaime fight for Brienne's affections. But remember, Brienne will eventually head to the Riverlands to try and secure the help of the Blackfish in Sansa's quest to retake Winterfell, and Jaime is being sent to the Riverlands at the head of the Lannister army to try and get rid of the Blackfish. So they will definitely be meeting up with each other. And for those of you that are wondering where Bronn is, he actually appears in the trailer briefly here, putting Pod in a chokehold, like, oh my god, I can't believe I haven't seen you in so long. So Bronn is still around. It's just that Jaime only just mentioned him in the previous episode when he was like, I'm gonna get Bronn, we're gonna assassinate the High Sparrow, and Cersei just pumped the brakes on it hardcore. Just do not do that. So I'm hoping Brienne's able to Joffrey slap some sense into Jaime, but it kind of looks like Jaime's determined to be a douchebag this season. So you guys let me know in the comments, what do you think is gonna happen when Jaime and Brienne meet up and they're at odds? She's trying to get the help of the Blackfish, Jaime's trying to get rid of the Blackfish. But in related news, my next Game of Thrones video will be the Q&A, so I'll be pulling questions from my episode 6 video as well as this video. So just leave all your questions about episode 6, about Dunk and Egg, about Brienne, anything you guys want to talk about. I feel like we're mostly going to be talking about Cold Hands, but there's a couple other really big things going on. While you guys wait for my next video to post, you can click here for my episode 6 video, and you can click here to learn about how the actor that plays Ramsay Bolton wants to die on the show. He talked a little bit about how he wants to go. So thank you so much for watching, everybody. Let's high five. I'll see you guys tonight.